Okay, so there's this movie, which is basically the perfect time capsule of the 1980s. In this movie, you've got greed, excess, and ridiculous fashion, which are all components of the 1980s, and somehow this movie still is hilarious. What is the movie? Trading Places, starring both Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd from 1983. A movie so 80s it practically smells like hairspray, cigars, and overpriced cologne. But here's the thing. It's not just an 80s movie relic. Trading Places still works today. In fact, it might hit harder now than it did back then because, let's face it and be honest, the whole rich people casually playing games with our lives thing, that concept hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, the concept of the rich playing with people's lives is not aged like a fine wine, but rather more like spoiled milk. So let's do the movie setup without spoiling the whole ride. Louis Winthrop III is a blue-blooded rich guy who never, ever had a bad day in his life. Dan Aykroyd plays him with that perfect mix of both being smug yet clueless. The kind of guy who thinks that a life hardship is when his butler brings the wrong wine for dinner. Then we have Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy, in just his second breakout movie role. He plays a street-smart hustler who is doing what needs to be done to survive. Then we've got the Dukes, who are two crusty old billionaires who treat human lives like poker chips. They make a cruel bet in which they take everything from Louis and hand it all over to Billy Ray, which flips both the worlds upside down, and then they just sit back and watch the chaos. Much of that chaos is comedy gold for us, the viewers. Okay, I'm outside, so hopefully this doesn't affect the sound. On paper, Trading Places is a comedy, but underneath, it's a razor-sharp satire about class, race, and privilege, and that's why it still feels fresh today. First, let's talk about Eddie Murphy. By 1983, he'd already blown up on SNL, Saturday Night Live for you young'uns, and the movie 48 Hours with Nick Nolte had just come out 6 months prior. With this movie, this was his actual coronation. He wasn't just funny, he was commanding. The confidence, the timing, the charisma, all in his second major role. You ever see somebody like so good it feels like the camera belongs to them? That's Eddie Murphy here in this movie. And Dan Aykroyd, meanwhile, he also was a previous Saturday Night Live veteran. He's about to hit with Ghostbusters, and he already had a few films under his belt. But this performance, brilliant. Watching him unravel from being the smug banker to a drunken salmon-stuffed Santa Claus on the bus is one of the funniest spirals ever put on film. Tell me you didn't laugh out loud at that scene. I know you did. And then there's Jamie Lee Curtis. Pause for respect. Jamie Lee Curtis. Before this, she was the Halloween scream queen. Trading Places was her pivot into comedy, and she owned it. Funny, sharp, completely holding her own against two comedy giants. And a fun fact, she took the role for just $70,000 because she wanted to break out of that horror typecasting. It was probably the best career move she ever did. Now a little nugget. About the movie. It almost looked completely different. Originally, the roles were written for Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. I mean, can you picture that? I mean, the energy would have been totally different, and they had just done a few projects together, so fate handed it over to Murphy and Aykroyd instead. Honestly, it was a great happy accident in Hollywood history. Here's another bit of trivia. The original script wasn't about rich and poor at all. It was about two con men swapping lives. The studio shifted it, and suddenly you had this biting class commentary. Imagine if they hadn't changed it. No social satire, no sharp edge, just a wacky con man caper. Wouldn't be the same. Let's go back to the Dukes. The Dukes were played by iconic movie legends Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici. Cartoonishly evil, but in that, oh, I know these guys like this way. You've met them before, maybe at a golf club, maybe in a boardroom, maybe at a charity event, but that's the brilliance. They're definitely funny villains, but they're also 100% believable, which is terrifying. And here's where it gets even better. Remember the end credits of Coming to America? Those homeless old guys Prince Akeem gives money to? Yep, that's the Dukes. Same actors, same characters, now broke. Murphy basically turned Coming into America into a stealth sequel. That right there is actually MCU level crossover before the MCU even existed. And let's do a quick Easter egg for you. The famous train sequence at the end, the beef jerky, all that fun stuff, a lot of that was improvised. slightly chaotic, but kind of like anything goes by. That was like all totally real, which makes sense now, right? And then there's the law, and I'm not kidding. Trading Places actually influenced actual U.S. financial law. The so-called Eddie Murphy rule was added to prevent insider trading on agricultural futures. Congress literally looked at this comedy and said, yeah, we should probably fix that loophole. How many comedies can say they actually changed Wall Street? That's what makes this movie so layered. On the surface, slapstick of one-liners. Underneath, real financial mechanics. Did you ever think you learned about commodity trading from a Christmas comedy? Probably not. The wild part is, it sticks. People still reference frozen concentrated orange juice futures because of this movie. And then there's the legacy. Looking good, Lewis. Feeling good, Billy Ray. That exchange is still quoted. It's been in commercials, memes, sitcoms. 4 decades later, people still say it. That's cultural staying power right there. Now, let's be real. Some stuff, of course, has not aged perfectly. The fashion, totally outrageous. The giant iPhone, or giant phones, I should say, the shoulder pads, the 80s party culture, that's basically another planet now. And yeah, a couple of jokes land a little bit differently today, but the core message is what is untouchable. Wealth and opportunity aren't always earned. Sometimes they're just handed out, or worse, yanked away for sport. Sound familiar? Yep. That's why it feels so relevant in 2025. And we can't forget Jamie Lee Curtis again, because honestly, she deserves another shout out. She didn't just play a side role. She brought heart, brains, and a sense of agency to this film. She wasn't the damsel in distress. She was part of the team. That's why audiences loved her then, and still do. And here's one last bit of trivia, because I know I'm going on and on about it. Trading Places was a box office smash. It was also the movie that fully cemented Eddie Murphy as Hollywood's next megastar. Without it, maybe no Beverly Hills Cop, maybe no Coming to America. This was the initial spark that set Eddie Murphy on fire in Hollywood. So yeah, Trading Places is still relevant, it's still funny, and still absolutely biting in its social commentary. And maybe still just a little too real for comfort. It's proof that a good comedy doesn't just make sense. It makes you see the absurdity in the world, and maybe, just maybe, it makes you think about it while you're laughing your head off. If nothing else, Trading Places may be drenched in 80s hairspray and shoulder pads, but peel that back, and it's basically timeless proof that some comedies don't just age well, they age into classics.